Hey guys. Sorry if Brian's voice on Vyond gets weird, but anyways, today I'm going to describe all the presidents from 1 to 45. So let's go. George Washington was one of the founding fathers. He was the first president of the United States from April 30, 1789 to March 4, 1797. He commanded Patriot forces in the new nation's American Revolutionary War and led them to victory over the British. Washington also presided at the Constitutional Convention of 1787, which established the new federal government. For his leadership he has been called the father of his country. He was born on February 22, 1732 in Pope's Creek, Virginia, and he died on December 14, 1799 in Mount Vernon, Virginia. John Adams was one of the founding fathers. He was the second President of the United States from March 4, 1797 to March 4, 1801. He was a lawyer, diplomat, and leader of American independence from Great Britain. Adams was a dedicated diarist and correspondent with his wife and advisor Abigail, and recorded important historical information on the era. He was born on October 30, 1735 in Quincy, Massachusetts, and he died on July 4, 1826 in Quincy, Massachusetts. Thomas Jefferson was one of the founding fathers. He is the third President of the United States from March 4, 1801 to March 4, 1809. Jefferson was a proponent of democracy, republicanism, and individual rights, motivating American colonists to break from the Kingdom of Great Britain and form a new nation. He produced formative documents and decisions at both the state and national level. He is also the author because he wrote the Declaration of Independence back on July 4, 1776. He was born on April 13, 1743 in Shadwell, Virginia, and he died on July 4, 1826 in Charlottesville, Virginia. James Madison was one of the founding fathers. He is the fourth President of the United States from March 4, 1809 to March 4, 1817. He is hailed as the father of the Constitution for his pivotal role in drafting and promoting the United States Constitution and the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, and 10th Amendments, also known as the Bill of Rights, back on December 15, 1791. He was born on March 16, 1751 in Port Conway, Virginia, and he died on June 28, 1836 in Orange, Virginia. James Monroe was one of the founding fathers. He is the fifth President of the United States from March 4, 1817 to March 4, 1825. He is perhaps best known for his foreign policy principle, known as the Monroe Doctrine, which disallowed further European colonization of the Americas, which began in 1823. Monroe was the last president of the Virginia dynasty, and his presidency ushered in what is known as the Era of Good Feelings. He was born on April 28, 1758 in Monroe Hall, Virginia, and he died on July 4, 1831 in New York City, New York. John Quincy Adams was the sixth President of the United States from March 4, 1825 to March 4, 1829. During his long diplomatic and political career, Adams also served as an ambassador, United States Senator, and member of the United States House of Representatives. He was the eldest son of John Adams, who served as president from 1797 to 1801. Initially a Federalist like his father, he won election to the presidency as a member of the Democratic-Republican Party. He was born on July 11, 1767 in Quincy, Massachusetts, and he died on February 23, 1848 in Washington, D.C. Andrew Jackson was the seventh President of the United States from March 4, 1829 to March 4, 1837. Before being elected to the presidency, Jackson gained fame as a general in the United States Army and served in both houses of Congress. As president, Jackson sought to advance the rights of the common man against a corrupt aristocracy and to preserve the Union. He was born on March 15, 1767 in Waxhaw Settlement between both Carolinas, and he died on June 8, 1845 in Nashville, Tennessee. Martin Van Buren was the 8th President of the United States from March 4, 1837 to March 4, 1841. He won the 1836 presidential election. He lost his 1840 re-election due in part to the poor economic conditions of the Panic of 1837. He was born on December 5, 1782 in Kinderhook, New York, and he died on July 24, 1862 in Kinderhook, New York. William Henry Harrison was the 9th President of the United States from March 4, 1841 to April 4, 1841. Harrison was the first member elected to the United States House of Representatives from the Northwest Territory, and later was the first governor of the Indiana Territory. He famously led U.S. military and state militia forces against Native Americans at the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811. He was promoted to Major General in the regular United States Army in the War of 1812. He was born on February 9, 1773 in Charles City County, Virginia, and he died on April 4, 1841 at the White House. John Tyler was the 10th President of the United States from April 4, 1841 to March 4, 1845. He was a supporter of states' rights, and as president, he adopted nationalist policies only when they did not infringe on the powers of the states. His unexpected rise to the presidency, with the resulting threat to the presidential ambitions of Henry Clay and other politicians, left him estranged from both major political parties. He was born on March 29, 1790 in Charles City County, Virginia, and he died on January 18, 1862 in Richmond, Virginia. James Knox Polk was the 11th President of the United States from March 4, 1845 to March 4, 1849. During Polk's presidency, the United States expanded significantly with the annexation of the Republic of Texas, the Oregon Territory, and the Mexican Cession following the American victory in the Mexican-American War. He was born on November 2, 1795 in Pineville, North Carolina, and he died on June 15, 1849 in Nashville, Tennessee. Zachary Taylor was the 12th President of the United States from March 4, 1849 to July 9, 1850. Taylor previously was a career officer in the United States Army, rose to the rank of Major General and became a national hero as a result of his victories in the Mexican-American War. As a result, he won election to the White House despite his vague political beliefs. He was born on November 24, 1784 in Barboursville, Virginia, and he died on July 9, 1850 in the White House. Millard Fillmore was the 13th President of the United States from July 9, 1850 to March 4, 1853. He was instrumental in getting the Compromise of 1850 passed, a bargain that led to a brief truce in the battle over slavery. He failed to win the Whig nomination for president in 1852. He gained the endorsement of the nativist Know Nothing Party 4 years later, and finished third in that election. He was born on January 17, 1800 in Moravia, New York, and he died on March 8, 1874 in Buffalo, New York. Franklin Pierce was the 14th President of the United States from March 4, 1853 to March 4, 1857. He alienated anti-slavery groups by championing and signing the Kansas-Nebraska Act and enforcing the Fugitive Slave Act, yet he failed to stem conflict between North and South, setting the stage for Southern secession and the American Civil War. He was born on November 23, 1804 in Hillsborough, New Hampshire, and he died on October 9, 1869 in Concord, New Hampshire. James Buchanan was the 15th President of the United States from March 4, 1857 to March 4, 1861. He is served immediately prior to the American Civil War. A member of the Democratic Party, he was the 17th United States Secretary of State and had served in the Senate and House of Representatives before becoming president. He was born on April 23, 1791 in Cove Gay, Pennsylvania, and he died on June 1, 1868 in Wheatland, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Abraham Lincoln was the 16th President of the United States from March 4, 1861 to April 15, 1865. Lincoln led the nation through the Civil War, its bloodiest war and its greatest moral, constitutional, and political crisis. In doing so, he preserved the Union, abolished slavery, strengthened the federal government, and modernized the economy. He was born on February 12, 1809 in Sinking Spring Farm near Hodgenville, Kentucky, and he died on April 15, 1865 in the White House thanks to John Wilkes Booth. Andrew Johnson was the 17th President of the United States from April 15, 1865 to March 4, 1869. Johnson assumed the presidency as he was Vice President of the United States at the time of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. A Democrat who ran with Lincoln on the National Union ticket, Johnson came to office as the Civil War concluded. His plans did not give protection to the former slaves. He was acquitted in the Senate by one vote. He was born on December 9, 1808 in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he died on July 31, 1875 in Elizabethton, Tennessee. Ulysses Simpson Grant was the 18th President of the United States from March 4, 1869 to March 4, 1877. Commanding General of the Army, soldier, international statesman, and author. During the American Civil War, Grant led the Union Army to victory over the Confederacy with the supervision of President Abraham Lincoln. During the Reconstruction era, President Grant led the Republicans in their efforts to remove the vestiges of Confederate nationalism, racism, and slavery. He was born on April 27, 1822 in Point Pleasant, Ohio, and he died on July 23, 1885 in Wilton, New York. Rutherford Burchard Hayes was the 19th President of the United States from March 4, 1877 to March 4, 1881. He has also served as an American representative and governor of Ohio. Hayes was a lawyer and staunch abolitionist who defended refugee slaves in court proceedings in the antebellum years. During the American Civil War, he was seriously wounded fighting in the Union Army. He was born on October 4, 1822 in Delaware, Ohio, and he died on January 17, 1893 in Fremont, Ohio. James Abram Garfield was the 20th President of the United States from March 4, 1881 to September 19, 1881. Garfield had served 9 terms in the House of Representatives, and had been elected to the Senate before his candidacy for the White House, though he declined the Senate seat once elected president. He was the first sitting member of Congress to be elected to the presidency, and remains the only sitting House member to gain the White House. He was born on November 19, 1831 in Moreland Hills, Ohio, and he died on September 19, 1881 in Elberon, New Jersey. Chester Alan Arthur was the 21st President of the United States from September 19, 1881 to March 4, 1885. He served as Quartermaster General during the American Civil War. Arthur was an important supporter of Conkling and the stalwart faction of the Republican Party. He was born on October 5, 1829 in Fairfield, Vermont, and he died on November 18, 1886 in Manhattan, New York. Grover Cleveland was the 22nd President of the United States from March 4, 1885 to March 4, 1889. Cleveland was the leader of the pro-business Bourbon Democrats who opposed high tariffs, free silver, inflation, imperialism, and subsidies to business, farmers, or veterans on libertarian philosophical grounds. His crusade for political reform and fiscal conservatism made him an icon for American conservatives of the era. He was born on March 18, 1837 in Caldwell, New Jersey, and he died on June 24, 1908 in Princeton, New Jersey. Benjamin Harrison was the 23rd President of the United States from March 4, 1889 to March 4, 1893. During the American Civil War, he served in the Union Army as a colonel, and was confirmed by the U.S. Senate as a brevet brigadier general of volunteers in 1865. Harrison unsuccessfully ran for governor of Indiana in 1876. He was born on August 20, 1833 in North Bend, Ohio, and he died on March 13, 1901 in Indianapolis, Indiana. Grover Cleveland was the 24th President of the United States from March 4, 1893 to March 4, 1897. He was elected again as a Democrat because he won twice in 1884 and 1892 election respectively. William McKinley was the 25th President of the United States from March 4, 1897 to September 14, 1901. McKinley was the last president to have served in the American Civil War and the only one to have started the war as an enlisted soldier, beginning as a private in the Union Army and ending as a brevet major. After the war, he settled in Canton, Ohio, where he practiced law and married Ida Saxton. He was born on January 29, 1843 in Niles, Ohio, and he died on September 14, 1901 in Buffalo, New York. Theodore Roosevelt was the 26th President of the United States from September 14, 1901 to March 4, 1909. As a leader of the Republican Party, he became a driving force for the progressive era in the United States in the early 20th century. As a leader of the progressive movement, he championed his square deal domestic policies, promising the average citizen fairness, breaking of trusts, regulation of railroads, and pure food and drugs. He was born on October 27, 1858 in New York City, New York, and he died on January 6, 1919 in Oyster Bay, New York. William Howard Taft was the 27th President of the United States from March 4, 1909 to March 4, 1913. In the White House, he focused on East Asia more than European affairs and repeatedly intervened to prop up or remove Latin American governments. Taft sought reductions to trade tariffs, then a major source of governmental income, but the resulting bill was heavily influenced by special interests. He was born on September 15, 1857 in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he died on March 8, 1930 in Washington, D.C. Woodrow Wilson was the 28th President of the United States from March 4, 1913 to March 4, 1921. He led the United States during World War I, establishing an activist foreign policy known as Wilsonianism. He was one of the three key leaders at the 1919 Paris Peace Conference, where he championed a new League of Nations, but he was unable to win Senate approval for U.S. participation in the League. He was born on December 28, 1856 in Staunton, Virginia, and he died on February 3, 1924 in Washington, D.C. Warren Gamaliel Harding was the 29th President of the United States from March 4, 1921 to August 2, 1923. He was one of the most popular U.S. presidents, but the subsequent exposure of scandals that took place under his administration such as Teapot Dome eroded his popular regard, as did revelations of an affair by Nan Britton, one of his mistresses. In historical rankings of the U.S. presidents, Harding is often rated among the worst. He was born on November 2, 1865 in Blooming Grove, Ohio, and he died on August 2, 1923 in San Francisco, California of a heart attack. Calvin Coolidge was the 30th President of the United States from August 2, 1923 to March 4, 1929. Coolidge worked his way up the ladder of Massachusetts state politics, eventually becoming governor. His response to the Boston police strike of 1919 thrust him into the national spotlight and gave him a reputation as a man of decisive action. He was born on July 4, 1872 in Plymouth Notch, Vermont, and he died on January 5, 1933 in Northampton, Massachusetts. Herbert Clark Hoover was the 31st President of the United States from March 4, 1929 to March 4, 1933. As the Great Depression president, his domestic programs were overshadowed by the onset of the Great Depression. Hoover was defeated in a landslide election in 1932. Hoover became staunchly conservative, and advocated against Roosevelt's New Deal policies. He was born in August 10, 1874 in West Branch, Iowa, and he died of a heart attack on October 20, 1964 in New York City, New York. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the 32nd President of the United States from March 4, 1933 to April 12, 1945. He is the longest president to be sworn ever. Roosevelt directed the federal government during most of the Great Depression. He led World War II. Following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, an event he famously called a date which will live in infamy, Roosevelt obtained a declaration of war on Japan, Germany, and Italy. He was born on January 30, 1882 in Hyde Park, New York, and he died on April 12, 1945 in Warm Springs, Georgia. Harry S. Truman was the 33rd President of the United States from April 12, 1945 to January 20, 1953. He is known for implementing the Marshall Plan to rebuild the economy of Western Europe, for establishing the Truman Doctrine and NATO against Soviet and Chinese communism, and for intervening in the Korean War. He used the veto power 180 times. He was born on May 8, 1884 in Lamar, Missouri, and he died on December 26, 1972 in Kansas City, Missouri. Dwight David Eisenhower was the 34th President of the United States from January 20, 1953 to January 20, 1961. He was responsible for planning and supervising the invasion of North Africa in Operation Torch in 1942-43 and the successful invasion of France and Germany in 1944-45 from the Western Front. He also entered the presidential race as a Republican to block the isolationist foreign policies. He was born on October 14, 1890 in Denison, Texas, and he died on March 28, 1969 in Washington, D.C. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was the 35th President of the United States from January 20, 1961 to November 22, 1963. He served at the height of the Cold War, and the majority of his presidency dealt with managing relations with the Soviet Union. In April 1961, he authorized a failed joint CIA attempt to overthrow the Cuban government of Fidel Castro in the Bay of Pigs invasion. He was born in May 29, 1917 in Brookline, Massachusetts, and he died on November 22, 1963 in Dallas, Texas. Lyndon Baines Johnson was the 36th President of the United States from November 22, 1963 to January 20, 1969. In domestic policy, Johnson designed the Great Society legislation to expand civil rights, public broadcasting, Medicare, Medicaid, aid to education, the arts, urban and rural development, public services, and his war on poverty. Johnson's presidency marked the peak of modern liberalism after the New Deal era. He was born on August 27, 1908 in Stonewall, Texas, and he died on January 22, 1973 in Stonewall, Texas. Richard Mulhous Nixon was the 37th President of the United States from January 20, 1969 to August 9, 1974. Nixon ended American involvement in the war in Vietnam in 1973 and brought the American powers home, and ended the military draft. He imposed wage and price controls for 90 days, enforced desegregation of Southern schools, established the Environmental Protection Agency, and began the war on cancer. He was born on January 9, 1913 in Yorba Linda, California, and he died on April 22, 1994 in New York City, New York. Gerald Randolph Ford was the 38th President of the United States from August 9, 1974 to January 20, 1977. He enlisted in the U.S. Naval Reserve. Domestically, Ford presided over the worst economy in the 4 decades since the Great Depression, with growing inflation and a recession during his tenure. He was born on July 14, 1913 in Omaha, Nebraska, and he died on December 26, 2006 in Rancho Mirage, California. Jimmy Earl Carter was the 39th President of the United States from January 20, 1977 to January 20, 1981. Carter pursued the Camp David Accords, the Panama Canal Treaties, the second round of strategic arms limitation talks, and the return of the Panama Canal Zone to Panama. Carter escalated the Cold War by ending détente, imposing a grain embargo against the Soviets, enunciating the Carter Doctrine, and leading an international boycott of the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow. He was born on October 1, 1924 in Plains, Georgia. Ronald Wilson Reagan was the 40th President of the United States from January 20, 1981 to January 20, 1989. Reagan enacted cuts in domestic discretionary spending, cut taxes, and increased military spending, which contributed to increased federal outlays overall, even after adjustment for inflation. He transitioned Cold War policy from détente to rollback by escalating an arms race with the USSR while engaging in talks with Gorbachev. He was born on February 6, 1911 in Tampico, Illinois, and he died on June 5, 2004 in Los Angeles, California. George Herbert Walker Bush was the 41st President of the United States from January 20, 1989 to January 20, 1993. Bush signed the North American Free Trade Agreement, which created a trade bloc consisting of the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Domestically, Bush reneged on a 1988 campaign promise and signed a bill to increase taxes. He was born on June 12, 1924 in Milton, Massachusetts, and he died on November 30, 2018 in Houston, Texas. Bill Clinton was the 42nd President of the United States from January 20, 1993 to January 20, 2001. He passed welfare reform and the state children's health insurance program, as well as financial deregulation measures and the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act and also the Commodity Futures Modernization Act of 2000. He ordered U.S. military intervention in the Bosnian and Kosovo wars, signed the Iraq Liberation Act, participated in the 2000 Camp David Summit, and assisted the Northern Ireland peace process. He was born on August 19, 1946 in Hope, Arkansas. George Walker Bush was the 43rd President of the United States from January 20, 2001 to January 20, 2009. Bush responded with what became known as the Bush Doctrine, launching a war on terror, an international military campaign that included the war in Afghanistan in 2001 and the Iraq War in 2003. He signed into law broad tax cuts, the Patriot Act, the No Child Left Behind Act, the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act, Medicare prescription drug benefits for seniors, and funding for the AIDS relief program known as PEPFAR. He was born on July 6, 1946 in New Haven, Connecticut. Barack Hussein Obama was the 44th President of the United States from January 20, 2009 to January 20, 2017. He promoted inclusiveness for LGBT Americans. He increased U.S. troop levels in Afghanistan, reduced nuclear weapons with the United States-Russia New START Treaty, and ended military involvement in the Iraq War. He ordered military involvement in Libya in opposition to Muammar Gaddafi. He also ordered the military operations that resulted in the deaths of Osama bin Laden and suspected Yemeni al-Qaeda operative Anwar al-Awlaki. He was born on August 4, 1961 in Honolulu, Hawaii. Donald John Trump was the 45th President of the United States from January 20, 2017 to January 20, 2021, but if he's re-elected, then it will end January 20, 2025. Trump ordered a travel ban on citizens. He signed tax cut legislation which cut tax rates for individuals and businesses and also rescinded the individual insurance mandate provision of the Affordable Care Act and opened the Arctic Refuge for oil drilling. He enacted a partial repeal of the Dodd-Frank Act. He recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He was born on June 14, 1946 in Queens, New York City. That's all of the presidents we have from 1 to 45.